Welcome to Food Shrinks.
Welcome to Food Shrinks.
Hello, so good to be here.
Happy to be
Hi.
back and
How you doing,
together.
Molly P?
I'm good. I'm
Living for
happy
the
to see you
pink
guys.
hair.
I know. It was a whim because my hair appointment got moved. So I'm going to cover for Clarissa for some weeks. And so I was like, you know what? I can't go another day without color. And I certainly can't wait until September. So I just did it myself in my bathroom.
Oh my God, that's DIY?
It is
Yeah,
DIY.
Get it. Come to my house. Wow. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm pretty excited about what we're going to be doing for the next 3 episodes, which
yes.
are, it is entitled, we don't know what it's entitled yet, but here's what we were thinking about. Everybody's going to talk about their biggest trigger. And today, our episode is going to star Clarissa.
Ta-da! My favorite.
I love this podcast. This is why you're our people listening, because it's like you're as excited to hear about Clarissa's biggest trigger as we are.
As
This,
you both are, I'm sure.
this is
Yes.
a really exciting day. Clarissa,
Yeah.
what is your biggest trigger?
So January, I got COVID and it was long COVID. And so, of course, the fatigue was hard. But it was actually the recovery from that, which is where I lost sense of taste and smell
Whoa.
for about 6 months or 5 months on, and then it would come back on and then it would come off. So, I always thought that, the one sense I wouldn't want to lose would be sight, but taste was huge. And taste and smell at the same time was even harder because I like to think that some of the only joy I have left in my life, because I don't drink, I don't, party or do those things, is like I love my food.
Mm.
And what was really curious that happened was, I started finding myself not enjoying my food anymore. Like in the early days, I could still imagine what it tastes like and I could still kind of go to that place. But I started to notice, like, one of my favorite things in the evening is like yogurt with apples and cinnamon.
Yeah.
And so I would open the fridge and I would go and I was like, huh, are you really hungry? Well, you can't taste it anyways. Maybe this is emotional. And so I wouldn't have it. And sure enough, I really stopped. I lost interest in eating. And then what happened was I started to lose weight and people started to comment on it. And that same kind of intoxicating, kind of slow experience of it not feeling that hard, which was very familiar to me when I first developed even anorexia. It didn't feel that hard at first.
You mean not eating? Not eating didn't
Yeah,
feel
not
hard. Mhm.
eating, I was still eating. I wasn't not eating. I would just wasn't
Eating
probably
enough.
preparing the same
Yeah.
volume. Yeah,
Yeah.
same volume of food. I would just have like a chicken breast because it's like just, you got to
Get it
eat.
done. Right.
Right? Exactly. It was just became part and parcel. And at the same time, for myself, exercise is so important. So I was really for my mental health.
Right.
So I was really not really even recognizing that I was still exercising probably close to or the same amount, even though it was a struggle because of the fatigue, that I just was not eating enough food. And so, really, quickly enough, symptoms of even my alcoholism started to return, where I started, doing more impulsive things, starting to have cravings or thoughts about alcohol. And then I did have an impulsive return to use at
Mm.
one point. And that was when it was like, hey, this is serious. I've got something serious going on. And I need to just get back on my food plan, because this is what all of that behavior is what brought me to food addiction in the first place. My sobriety, with or regular balanced daily meals is what removed my cravings for alcohol or my desire.
The most fascinating story.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think that? So, first of all, I'm so taken at like that part in this, like use of 12 step, but like that cunning, baffling and
Yeah.
powerful like nature of addiction. Were you at the point in your recovery where you were sort of just off food plan into like what I call like humble eating? Like you just kind of, you were in like a flow with food and that's why you,
Yeah, I
yeah,
never thought about it. I never thought about food. I never really
right.
experienced cravings. I was just living my life and, I just knew what I could eat and knew what I didn't eat anymore.
I mean, another podcast for another time, but like the thing I was really thinking about was two things. First of all, how like at least when I was in disease, like I would have been like, I would do anything to not want to taste. Like I would do anything. Like I would do
Yeah.
anything to lose
I
my
had
taste.
I had a spray that you sprayed on your tongue that made you lose taste.
Right. And then the other thing I was actually thinking of, which is another part, is like that when people are on these GLPs
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and they have this propensity to eating disorder, not addiction, but like really
Mhm.
eating disorder, how this has been my experience
Yeah.
clinically. Like this thing is so tricky. I mean, it's so tricky. So, like, Molly, do you have any questions? I have so many questions. My head might
Go
explode.
ahead. You go ahead.
I'm like fascinated. Because like in our last episode, like I was talking, like when I like figured out, I was like, oh my God, I actually need to like hire somebody on my team to help me, which is
Mm-hmm.
great, by the way. She should come on the show. But like what was the flag and like how did you ask for help? Like when did you know like did you know when you were eating one chicken breast for dinner that you were like, or were you in disease and it was like, good
No,
girl?
I think a part of me knew. A part of me knew, except that it was one of the hardest things for me to change. It was even one of the hardest things for me to change in my early recovery is
Yeah.
eating when I was not hungry.
Oh, so that's like a trigger on top of a trigger. So it's like you had
Yes,
this COVID and then you're like not hungry, even though you're
right.
exercising, even though stuff, the taste part made it so that
It
it
just
just,
made you not hungry. It just, my interoceptive awareness went off. I really had no idea. I was like, hydrating. I would eat food, but there was nothing for me to cue that that wasn't enough, other than the knowledge, the logical knowledge that, one chicken breast is not really going to cut it.
and I just think so many people listening just must be like, well, good for you. Like, good for you,
Mhm.
Clarissa. Like, you got to stop eating, but like,
Mhm.
what is it?
No, and
Right.
Mm.
it was
Tell us.
awful. It was awful because what eventually happened is just like anyone who goes on a diet, the hunger came back. And then I had that whole feeling of loss of control because now I couldn't taste the food, but I was just driven to be searching for food all
Oh,
of the
man.
time. And that felt out of control. So it was both spectrums of the out of control and then feeling like you're like starting to it's not about weight, but you just know like none of this is feeling good. My stomach is feeling super bloated. I know like I'm not making the most loving choices even around food. It's just like a whole thing of plain Greek yogurt, like the
Just
so
like
it went from
shoveling it in.
yeah from like low
Yeah.
volume to like high volume.
Right. And
And
I
then
think what I would say to listener is like, this is taking you out of life, right? Like the
oh,
restriction
Yeah.
is taking you out of life, the
absolutely.
noise, the overeating's taking like the Clarissa we all know and love is kind of like in a cage because this part that's caged is like out and
Mhm.
about deciding how hungry maybe you are today because you can't taste.
Right. And I'm talking to Molly and being like,
Mhm.
I don't know if I should be practicing right now. I don't know
Wow.
what's happening. I just had so much compassion for anyone who's ever had a reoccurrence and they feel like they go back to day one. I immediately felt like I had no idea what I was doing.
Mhm.
And like, should I be doing this anymore? Like my
Wow.
immediate
But
response in the
that's the
past
eating
was
disorder.
go
That,
to
Oh,
I
the
yeah.
mean,
treatment. Yeah.
the eating
Yeah.
disorder, that to me is the most eating disordered thing you could, and
Mhm.
diet culture, right? Like
Yeah.
I was actually thinking in the shower this morning about where I am in my recovery. And I was like, thank God I don't believe in starting over. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
thank God that is when I created like the sacred vow, like no cutting and running. And I'm like, thank like my whole life would be so shattered right now unnecessarily, like unnecessarily.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is like maybe the most evil part of diet culture is that when we are in these moments of long COVID or big stressful events, that we would take time to say, I'm starting over. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Today,
It's the desperation, right?
no, I think it's the abuse of diet culture.
I
I
agree.
think
I
it keeps us
agree.
stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Society
I would
somewhere
have
has
done
said that's what we do is we
anything
start
but
over. Yeah.
trust myself at
Yeah.
that moment,
Yeah.
right? That's what happens
But
is you
even,
just lose complete faith in
but
anything you have. And it took me a few days. It took me talking to Molly. It took me connecting with my people and my therapist to be like, hey, you know
wait,
what to do
can
here.
you literally step by step walk us through how you got out of it? Because to me, if I only want to know this.
Yeah,
So
well, first I reached out to Molly
wait, like when did it
and
occur to you this was bad?
oh, that
I think we talked about it pretty much immediately as soon as we knew it was COVID and you
Well,
didn't
yeah,
have,
if
I
you
mean, we were
two are
talking
not the
about it.
shout out to have a bestie who
Yeah.
has
yeah.
recovery, honest to
We were
God,
already
right?
talking about it. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the
And
minute
it was
Clarissa got COVID, she called you, but she was like, "Girl, this might be
Yeah, because
messy."
I had been really, really sick. And so she was constantly checking on me, right? There was a lot of communication. And as I was getting better, she got sick. And folks, we are 27 hours apart by car. Like we did not get each other sick. We did not get each
Maybe.
other sick, but I was recovering from COVID, influenza A, and sinus infection. And then she starts getting it. I know, right? And I'm like, here's what was going on for me. Cause we were like comparing symptoms, we're comparing notes. And so then we were on it. I feel like we were on it from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet I still had still some of the behaviors were still happening. And if I met with my friend the other week and she said had gone to the spa and she's like, "Oh yeah, I remember you telling me that you're not eating enough." So I had
Interesting.
the awareness there, but I still feel like maybe not even like the cognitive
Well, it's
capacity.
like there was no siren. Oh, so you were like 2 6. I'm like, where's the siren? Like there was
Mhm.
no siren because you were so sick.
Yeah, I really don't
Oh
feel
God, that's
like there
so
was,
interesting.
and that's why it was, and it happened slowly, right? Like I was trying to stay aware of it, trying to stay on top of it. And then for me, honestly, I needed that reoccurrence with the alcohol to be like, okay,
So that's when it was. Then it was
yeah,
like, oh, okay,
that's
now I
when it
need to
was
go
like,
get some
this
help.
is enough. And I was like, Molly, this is serious. And then I just went, right back to like eating my 3 meals. And it transitioned so quickly, right?
Oh,
Back to
it's
what you
wild how
know.
quickly you can feel better from a relapse in eating disorder. I just want to say
Right.
it's like
Yeah.
right.
3 days.
Right.
This is why I hate starting over because like in 3 days you can be like, wait, I totally understand what happened, but like, would you mind like granularly, like what help did you get? Like, what did you do? So you had a
Well,
food plan you knew and loved.
yep. I just went back to like scheduling my meals a little bit more, giving myself some more structure
Did you
around
have,
food.
were you like sending your food to Molly or anything like that, or just you?
No, I've never really felt that was necessary, not that
Mhm.
level of accountability. I just knew like, listen, you're just going to have to sit and be present with your meals and just this is your number one job
Mm.
right now in recovery. And so I did that. I continued to, still do all the self-care things that I do, prioritize sleep, and then I also started to look at rest a little bit more. And I
Interesting.
scheduled, I see my therapist once every 2 weeks. I started seeing them weekly, started to
Mhm.
talk about maybe some of the stuff that was also going on. Um, yeah. And it happened so quickly where it felt like for me, I think something that's really important to talk to the listeners about is like I do have a brain injury from a car accident. And so anytime I'm not really eating the amount of appropriate fats that I should, I really tend to lose my wise mind in moments. And so it was just like going right back to that day where I never knew. I was so scared about am I back there where like alcohol could happen at any time again?
Yeah.
And it only took a few days of regular eating to be like, no, you got this.
Mm.
You got this. You're okay. You have everything you need. And that is just something that happened. And yeah, it's like, it was an important reminder for me, something I'm not gonna forget. But where I used to be like in shame about it, what I think was so different this time was like, oh, I see what happened. Of course that
Mm.
happened to you. Of course, you were just, feeding back into some of those old behaviors that felt so comfortable and felt so natural, and it did feel nice to like be losing weight again. I can't
Yeah.
say it didn't,
No, that's
right?
what's I mean, it's the most yeah, that's how I feel about a lot of times with compulsive overeaters that get a sniff of restriction. They think it's like ideal
Mhm.
when it's
Yeah.
illness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what you're saying, which house always wins. It doesn't matter. You're going to go back to binging. Like you can't. No one can keep that together,
Right.
Right.
or should they?
Yeah.
Do you think you have like a different level of respect for getting sick now, or like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I've now have a much greater respect for fatigue in general,
oh, say
being
more,
so aware
say
about
more.
it because it's for me, I am somebody who maybe the story I tell myself is I'm somebody with so much energy.
I
And
experience you that way.
yeah, yeah.
I do too.
And and that is who I am and who I want to be. And if I don't feel that way, immediately it feels like depression.
Oh, so you're like, this makes me want to cry. You're sort of like, so when you get tired, you run
Hmm.
past it because you're scared you're going to get depressed.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's why you won't rest.
Yeah.
And I bet you just saved someone's life there. Wow, that's really interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's challenging for me because, I also struggle with the ADHD. So some of this like, high intensity exercise that I do, it used to, I think, be for body image reasons, but now it's for mental focus and clarity. Like it
Yeah.
just actually allows me to feel balanced. So knowing I still had this work to show up for and still these things, and if they were important, I'd still want to try and get that workout in. And it was just like, yeah, it was a combination of things that nobody could sustain that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh.
So now, but you still have pieces or time periods now, maybe it hasn't happened in a while, but I know when we were on our trip, there would be moments where like you didn't have taste and smell, and it would be like you would say it out loud. And
Yeah,
I remember like, there would be days where you're like, yeah, I don't really necessarily, and maybe that's just like natural fluctuation of appetite too, but like there were definitely days where food was not an issue, and then there were other days where you're like, oh, nothing sounds good, nothing tastes good, right? Like nothing tastes. So
What do you
it's hard to
do then,
eat.
though? What do you do on the days where like the long COVID, that part of the long COVID comes back? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you
so I
do?
have specific foods that I know I'll always eat because they're going to keep me satiated and help me think well. So maybe it's like eggs and ground turkey and like some avocado.
Right.
So, those things are easy enough to eat. I know logically how they affect me, like my hunger and my, appetite, and that it really takes care of me. And so those are the foods that I'll just prioritize
What do you
when
say to
those days.
yourself when your taste buds are saying, "I'm not hungry, I can't taste"? Like, how do you get it down the chute?
Yeah, I really just know that like if I'm looking at the life that I want, that's a towards move for me to eat these foods that, that
Right.
my taste will come back. It's
Right.
just for today, right? And that anybody can sit and eat one meal.
You gotta go there.
Yeah.
Gotta go to like one meal at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if you, as obviously my own extreme personal bias on this question, but like, what if you couldn't? I'm fascinated that you were able to do all this yourself. I'm like J-Lo with the amount of help I need when I'm in crisis. Uh, what do you, what would you have done if you couldn't get it together on your own?
think I was reaching out for help,
Oh,
but
you were?
I
So
mean,
you
I
were
was
like honest, like a
certainly,
bunch of your power circle knew, like
oh
that you
yeah,
were
my
in
friends
trouble.
knew,
Okay, okay. That
like
makes more sense.
definitely, absolutely. Like
So
I certainly wasn't going through it alone. I was sharing the struggle,
when
which
did
I
it when did it occur to you that you had to like put the bat signal up to your power circle being like, guys, I'm not okay?
yeah, it was definitely the reoccurrence with alcohol. I
Oh, okay.
started
That was the
thinking
big
like that was big. I was like, okay, do I need to put a breathalyzer in my car
oh,
again? Because, I have DUIs in the past. This is really serious. Like that's the level of out of control I felt. And so it was like, I'm going to have normal therapy sessions. I just
right.
went back to all the things that make me feel really safe because I think I started to question, was I doing enough? And it didn't
Mhm.
take long for me to see, yeah, you are doing enough. You're okay. You just got caught up in that pattern.
Yeah. I say to clients all the time for almost 2 decades now, death, injury, illness are the top 3 reasons anecdotally in my practice that I've seen that people return to use.
Yeah.
And so, that whole, especially with long COVID and the fatigue, and if you do lose your taste and your smell, and some of the things that go along with long COVID, if I've had clients who like gain a bunch of weight because of inflammation and other, which can also be a trigger for people to get right back into eating disorder behavior. It is a funky phenomenon that, we're only 4 years into this whole, 4 almost 5 years into, like, even figuring out what is this thing doing to us in the long term. And like, the more we get it, because Clarissa, how many times have you had it at this point? Like just we just have to be aware that this
Mhm.
is with us to stay. And like you said, having respect for that
Yeah.
illness, and like really
Well,
taking care of ourselves.
the acceptance piece now, I think I really was fighting the acceptance of it. Like if I could just keep doing these things, it would go away. And
Mm.
now, like Molly said, the acceptance and just like even right now, I have a bit of strep throat. I just get sick really easily. I get sinus infections really easily. And so it just has to be like still no matter what, I just prioritize my food. Doesn't mean I have to
That's
stop
so good.
exercising if that's like helpful for me. I also rest way more than I allow myself to rest, especially during the summer where there's all these things you should be doing. But sometimes it's like, okay, I'll just throw on like Game of Thrones and just, chill
Mm.
and getting comfortable with that too.
We have a minute for one more question.
Yep.
Yeah.
One more, wrap it up.
Like I'm just thinking about this because I feel like I'm in like a primary selection process of entering your power circle, which like is very exciting to me. When you were telling, and I think this is good for the listener, like when you are telling people that you are struggling, but what happened for me was that nobody believed me. All my friends were like, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. And I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
girls, I'm not fine. I got to go find someone who's actually going to believe me what I'm saying. They had their own feelings about it. What were the things that like you heard back from the people in your power circle that was like, that made you that were fortifying to you, that made you know you're going to be okay, so we can all be great power circle members?
Yeah, I think one of the things that for sure Molly said is, this is you've got this. Like this is, what to do. And I'm here for you if you want me to cover anything. Like it was the compassion I felt from everyone, which was not my experience in the past, especially with like a reoccurrence of alcohol. It was, uh-oh, like we got to take care of this right away. And, one of my friends said, even if you drank once every like 6 years, you're still drinking like less than 99% of the population. Can you be okay with that?
Huh.
And that just felt like,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess that's true. Like it just reminded me of how long I've been at this and how hard I'm working and that just because, this is what I was going through right now, that it's okay to struggle, I think was the message overall, that I don't have to always be okay. Um and I do that for other people, but I don't always let people do that for me.
So beautiful. Healers are humans, That's what my
Yeah.
old shaman used to say to me. Healers are humans too. That's so beautiful. I'm so warm in my heart from this episode.
Mhm. It was a good one. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that, Clarissa.
We love
Yeah.
you, Clarissa.
Thanks for letting me have the space to share.
Ugh. Well, gang, we'll see you next week. We're going to leave you here and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Food Shrinks. Quick reminder, this podcast isn't a substitute for professional medical advice. Always consult your healthcare provider for guidance suited to your needs. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to help us reach others on the recovery journey. Take care and remember, freedom with food is possible. See you next time.